you still have to be responsible, because if the buyer does not pay the mortgage, you are still liable for that mortgage. You still have to pay for that mortgage. So you have to be ethical, not saying, okay, you don't pay for the mortgage, then I'm not going to pay for it, and I don't care. You do have to pay for that. You have to deal with that. You have to foreclose on that. But you are still responsible for making that mortgage, monthly mortgage payment.
Welcome to Spur Equity's Spur Your Wealth podcast, your ultimate guide to passive income through real estate investing. Join us as we together discover the secrets of building wealth one passive investment at a time.
From expert insights to inspiring success stories, this podcast will inspire you and empower you to take control of your family's financial future so you can live life on your own terms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spur Equity's Spur Your Wealth podcast. We are your hosts today, Param, Singh, and Rav Singh from Spur Equity. And on the Spur Your Wealth podcast, we aim to bring successful investors and experts and thought leaders on our podcast to share their story and secrets in investing so we can all stand to benefit from their experience. On today's episode, we have Rosa Tejado. Rosa came to the United States 14 years ago from Mexico City. She's owned a couple of businesses, one she sold for great profit, and another one that she bought that led to bankruptcy. She almost got evicted, had to work 2 jobs to support her family, and then she was introduced to real estate 8 years ago. And since then, she has learned the power of creative financing. She's passionate about helping others find their own financial freedom through creative financing. And so we'll get into that detail today and learn from her. So looking forward to learning from, someone like Rosa who's been successful using creative financing. So welcome, Rosa. So happy to have you on the Spur Your Wealth podcast. Really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Param, and thank you, Rab, for having me here.
Excellent. Great. So, I know in my intro, I gave a little bit of intro into your background and what's similar to some of the stories from other podcast guests that we have, including ourselves, is that, look, when we start out to do things for our family, it's not always roses, right? It's not always pretty. There's always challenges along the way, and you don't shy away from sharing that. And I really appreciate that. So Rosa, can you give a little bit of background on your journey, from Mexico City to here, and what you had your sights set on, for your family, and where you ended up, and then ultimately the real estate, how you got into real estate?
Yeah, well, I came here, like I said, 14 years ago, and it started when we used to live in the east coast of Mexico, which is a beautiful place. But my husband was laid off, and we had some options, and we decided to sell everything and burn all our boats and come here to the United States, to work and to seek for the American dream. We bought a business. Like I said, we bought that business. 5 years later, we sold it for a great profit. I didn't like the business because it was like an open store to the public, a retail store to be with my kids. So I hated that. And then we bought another business that my husband had to work, but we were actually, again, we were self-employed. So we had to let go of that business, and we became bankrupt, and that everything started falling apart. I had to work 2 jobs. We had to move out of the house into a very small apartment. I have 3 kids, and they were all in middle school and elementary school, and it was really challenging. And then I started hearing about real estate, and I started going to these networkings and to these real estate investment clubs. And I found a mentor, and that he was giving a coaching program. And I remember at that time it was like $5,000. And I go like, oh my God, where am I going to get $5,000? And so, I had some jewels my mom gave me that were very valuable to me, but I didn't use them, so I sold them, and I got into the program. and it was really the best thing that had happened to me. So that's how I started. And since then, I have been, hustling, because it's not something that happens from one day to another, and hustling and looking at the market and checking on properties. And I found also a partner, which was great. And he was actually part of the same mentoring program. And we started wholesaling properties, and then we discovered creative financing. And from there, we just, you know, kick off and learn these strategies of how to purchase homes with no money down, which was, perfect, which is perfect, because a lot of people think that you need money to buy real estate, but really you don't.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a second, but I just wanted to kind of make a couple of comments that I love the fact that, people are very risk avert. A lot of people don't take risks. But, my personal feeling is that if you are trying to make an impact, do a change, right? You got to go all in. And that's what I heard you say, that, first when you came from Mexico, you guys went all in. You burnt the boats. Love that analogy, right? And so you left, you can't go back, and now you gotta just keep moving forward, right? And mentally, you got to keep moving forward. So you did that. You got into the U.S., did what you had to do, got the businesses, made money, lost money, and then you found real estate. And finding real estate, you still had to do another go all the way in, right? And that's a hard thing to do, knowing that you only have limited capital, limited money. But if you have conviction, right? If you know that this is the path forward, this is the way, right? This is how you move forward, then you don't have a choice. You're going to succeed. Mentally, you're going to succeed. And so I love the fact what you just said, that, you just went all the way in. You found the money, however you did, even though it was very personal to you, it was very, close to your heart. But you knew that by doing that, there's going to be an impact that's going to happen for you and your family. And so that's what you ended up doing. And so just want to congratulate you on being you and doing that, because I think it takes a lot of gut. It takes a lot of just sacrifice, right? But at the end of the day, you do see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so congrats on that. I just wanted to kind of share my 2 cents there, that most people feel that they're very comfortable, that they're in a comfortable life, and they want to dream of bigger things, but the dreams don't come into reality because they don't take action, right? Absolutely. And so congrats once again on that. I think that's an amazing thing that you did for your family.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that it's very important, like, to have a why. Like, and my biggest why was my
Yeah.
family. My kids. I mean, they have to grow. They have to keep studying. They have to. I mean, they trust their parents, right, to do the right thing. So there's no other choice. There's no going back or feeling the victim. So that's
Yeah.
why I did what I did,
And big
because
learnings from your children, for
Yeah.
your children. I mean, you lead by example, right? You're doing this, they're seeing you do this. And so, they have their whole life ahead of them. Take these actions and do whatever is
Yeah.
necessary for you to put food on the table and to survive. I think that's amazing. I think kids learn from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Rav, you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? It's a lot of it has to do with mindset and confidence, right? That, what I see a lot of people doing today, that are, I sometimes look at my history and say, like, I was like that. I was standing on the sidelines, like watching other people do it, and like, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to be successful if I do that. And you kind of second guess yourself. But the mindset of, like, of confidence, of, like, the failure is not an option kind of thing, like, because I have to provide for my family, like, that's a great motivator. It's like, no, we got to make it happen.
Mhm.
And my parents, for example, my dad coming to America, which he had no idea what it was going to be like, back in the 70s. And so,
Yeah.
that's a really, really big, I mean, today, like, the world is kind of small. You kind of know what to expect when you're going somewhere, but think about it, in the 70s, like, you're going to a brand
Yeah.
new place. You don't
Right.
speak the language, you don't have money, and you're like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to figure it
yeah.
out. And that's the
That's
only
right.
option I have, because I got to make it work for my family. And that's kind of your story, Rosa, that, like, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to do well. We're going to, failure is not an option. And even when you're faced with failure or faced with challenges, you're like, okay, that's fine. We'll get over it and we'll figure out the next thing. We'll figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
And that, I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
have that mindset.
Yeah, I always give everybody the analogy that it's like, these little birds that are born in the top of the mountain, and they don't know how to fly, and they have to get to the ground, and they just roll themselves, and in their journey to the ground, they hit themselves with so many rocks, but they get there, and they just shake themselves, and they keep walking. I really feel like it's
Yeah.
like that.
Natural process. So let's move forward, right? So you discovered real estate, discovered a lot of different things that you're doing in real estate, and finally you came to creative financing. Maybe perhaps give us and our listeners some examples of what do you mean by no money down? What do you mean by creative financing? What does that look like in your world? Share some maybe real life examples if you don't mind.
You know what? There's a lot of ways to do creative financing, and some of them are like seller finance or private money. But I use a strategy that's called subject to. And subject to means that you purchase a property subject to the existing loan. So you don't assume the loan because you have to get permission from the bank to assume the loan, but you make payments on behalf of the seller. So you find a lot of properties that one way or another the seller needs to move out of the house because relocating, divorce, foreclosure, or whatever. And they have a very interesting interest rate, like 2.9%, 3.5%. And so you take over those payments. And basically, I mean, you don't have to put anything down. And if you do, for example, let's say that it's you purchased the property subject to the existing loan, but the property was going to foreclosure, and then have the loan current. You have to pay for the arrears, right?
Right, right.
And so you have that, and then you go to your private lender and say, hey, I have this property that has a lot of equity.
Mhm.
Would you let me to rehab the house, or to pay for the and to pay for the to reinstate the loan or whatever, and I'll give you a piece of the deal. And most of the time they'll say yes.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
don't have
that's
to use any of your money. So
right.
this is amazing.
Okay, great, Rosa. So now maybe let's focus on the exit strategies. You already kind of talked about it earlier. That what are you doing in terms of exiting in some of these properties, and how successful have you been in few of the examples that you just gave us?
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question. There's so many exit strategies that you can do when you purchase a subject to transaction or subject to properties. But my favorite one, it's called wraparound. So a wraparound is when you purchase a property subject to the existing loan, and then you sell it to a buyer that cannot get a loan with traditional financing, which is a lot of people here in the U.S. actually, and then you create another a promissory note at a higher amount and a higher interest rate than the original loan. So what you're doing is creating a new loan that's wrapping the underlying mortgage. Okay, so that is a great strategy because it's actually you profit from that three times. So you profit from the down payment that you get from the buyer. You profit from the cash flow because their interest rate is higher than their underlying interest rate. So the difference it would be your cash flow. And you profit most of the time they won't keep it for the 30-year term. And so because interest rate is higher than the underlying mortgage, then the money you make is the difference from both interest rates.
Correct. And these are considered legal ways of doing business. I mean, a lot of people are doing it. Have you ever found any issues from a legality standpoint?
No, I mean, you still have to be responsible because if the buyer does not pay the mortgage, you are still liable for that mortgage. You still have to pay for that mortgage. So you have to be ethical, not saying, okay, you don't pay for the mortgage, then I'm not going to pay for it, and I don't care. You do have to pay for that. You have to deal with that. You have to foreclose on that. But you are still responsible for making that monthly mortgage payment.
Makes sense. That's great. I think that's definitely something that we learned today, and I'm assuming our investors have learned also. Just because these are, as you said, creative ways for people to make deals in this environment. And so my last question that I guess I would ask would be is that based on where we're at in our cycle in the market itself, are you seeing opportunity where people need to exit, where you can come in and purchase these type of properties? How are you viewing the market right now?
Yeah, there's always opportunity. And I think when everybody runs from the market, you have to run towards it and the other way around. No? That's what they said. There's a great opportunities in properties because to purchase this type of properties, that people need to relocate to other places and there's no equity, but the interest rates like actually becomes the asset, not really the property. Property doesn't have any. So you get that property and wait for that appreciation. And you don't have to do anything because it's new. And you are helping the seller because if they want to sell a property and they just bought it, they have to come to the closing table with money. And so that's one way. I think that's a huge there's a huge opportunity in there.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said that really your asset is the interest rate, especially if folks had taken interest rates at 3.5%, historically
Mhm,
low in the entire country. And if you're able to get your hands on that, and then you
mhm,
can go ahead and wrap that and, get somebody at 8, 9, 10% interest, so your cash
mhm,
flow is the difference of that. So that's
yeah,
great. And so I'm glad that you're finding opportunity in this market also, given the tightening that we're seeing. But that
mhm,
creates an opportunity when people are exiting. You said you're jumping in,
mhm.
so more power to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of people that said, "Oh, the interest rates are 7%. The market is so tight right now. I'm not going to do anything." I think you have to keep learning. You have to keep going for new opportunities. Real estate can give you that access, either if it's creative financing or commercial. But that's what's powerful about real estate. That there's so many things that you can do, so many creative ways that you can use, that there's always a way to get into real estate even with no money.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest learning that we take away from today, and then I think our listeners will, because a lot of times, we talk about where, everyone knows what they know, right? And there's a lot of assumptions that are going on in the market that, like, yeah, when the market is like this, it's challenging, then cash is king, right? That people are like, oh, you have to have liquidity to make a move, and take advantage of the market when it's on a downturn and stuff. Here's a way where you don't have to have liquidity. You just have to get creative. You have to you still have to put in the work, but there's ways to do it even without liquidity and try to, take down some things that would be advantageous in today's markets. That's really great. I think a lot of our listeners will take that key takeaway, from today's podcast, because all we hear here in the commercial world is, hey, get ready, right? Keep some cash, keep some powder right on the side. And a lot of people are doing that. They're waiting in the sidelines trying to figure out, okay, when do we strike? But here's an avenue where, folks that are entering into investing in real estate, or may not have the liquidity but still have opportunities potentially in today's market. So that's great. I think that's
Right.
wonderful. So that's all the time we have today. So Rosa, I want to thank you from both of us and from our listeners for sharing not only your story but all of these options and this wonderful wisdom of creative ways into wonderful. And so I know that we'll have some further conversations with our listeners in looking at this potential option, and we'll definitely route them your way since you're the expert in creative financing. So again, thank you so much for sharing your story, and truly inspiring to see what you've done since you've, again, I talk about the mindset. So really inspiring to see that mindset in action, where you did that, coming from Mexico City and doing what you did for your family and continue to do. So congratulations on all of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the biggest thing here is what's your why. Why are you doing what you do? And that will change your mindset. If you have a powerful why, like I do, that will change your mindset. And like again, there's no option. You have
Yeah,
to succeed.
that's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you so
Mhm.
much again. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Spur Equity's Spur Your Wealth podcast. And again, we are your host, Param Singh and Rav Singh from Spur Equity. Remember, your journey to financial freedom begins both with knowledge and action, where knowledge is power.
But action is superpower, just like Rosa did. So until next time, happy investing. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Spur Your Wealth podcast. We hope you enjoyed the valuable insights and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on future episodes filled with actionable tips and strategies.
If you want more information about our investment projects, visit us at spurequity.com. If you have an inspiring story to share and would like to be a guest on our podcast, email us at podcast@spurequity.com. Until next time, happy investing.